It started with a whisper, not a scream, not a slammed door or a late-night text. Just a whisper, and not even to me. I was in the kitchen, rinsing out a wine glass we hadn't used in months. Emily had suggested we finally open that bottle of Tempranillo her mother brought from her trip to California. It's been aging long enough, she'd said with a smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. I poured one glass, not two. She never followed me into the kitchen. The sound came through the air like thread through fabric. Almost nothing. Almost missed. He doesn't need to know, Emily. Just do what you have to. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even advice. It was strategy. A mother's voice, calm and certain, like someone who's made peace with manipulation long ago. My hand froze. Water kept running. The wine glass tilted ever so slightly under the tap until it slipped from my fingers and knocked gently against the edge of the sink. No crack. Just that dull sound that sticks in the stomach. I turned the tap off slowly. Didn't breathe. In the living room, the TV played some muted documentary about seabirds migrating. But neither Emily nor her mother were looking at it. From where I stood, just out of view behind the kitchen's arch pass-through, I could see the side of her face, Emily's. Still, composed, her hands in her lap. Then Isabella leaned in, the kind of lean that mothers do when they want to drive a truth deeper. You deserve this. One day, when you're holding the child, you'll know it was worth it. I stepped back without thinking. A cabinet door creaked slightly as I bumped it with my hip. Emily looked toward the kitchen, and I quickly reached for a towel, pretending I'd spilled something. My hands moved on their own. But my ears were still in that room. Isabella's voice dropped lower, out of range. Emily said nothing. That, somehow, was worse. We'd been married 11 years. No children. Not by choice, but by design. Mine. After the surgery, after the appointments, we'd had the talk. The real one. About futures that don't involve lullabies or kindergarten drop-offs or graduation caps. Emily had said she understood. She cried once. In silence. And never again. She said she didn't want to be a mother to anyone but me. I believed her. That night, we sat together on the couch. She scrolled her phone absently, legs curled under her. I brought her the glass of wine. She smiled, took a sip, and set it down on the coffee table untouched for the next hour. Isabella left without a goodbye. Just a door clicking softly, then silence. Emily didn't mention the visit. Neither did I. But something had already shifted. Like a joint just slightly out of place. You can still move, still walk, but nothing feels right anymore. Later that week, I was clearing up after dinner, pasta, salad, her favorite dressing, and Emily was upstairs. I found the wine glass still on the table, dried lips of red staining the rim. Next to it was a folded piece of paper. Not hidden, not left out. It was a grocery list. Milk, lemons, prenatal vitamins. I held it too long. A few days later, her mother dropped by again. I watched from my office window as they stood in the driveway, laughing. Isabella hugged her, placed a hand on Emily's stomach, not in a strange way, not even in a deliberate one. Just a touch. Light. Like a wish being granted. That night, in bed, I lay awake beside her. She was asleep, breathing soft and even. I looked at the ceiling, counting the lines in the plaster. I remembered a night 8 years ago when we danced in the kitchen barefoot because the power had gone out and candles made the world feel warmer than electricity ever could. That version of us still lives in my memory, preserved in amber. Unreachable. Untouched. I didn't know what exactly I had heard. I didn't know what Isabella meant. But I knew something was shifting under my feet. Not an earthquake, yet, but tremors. And I learned something early in life. When the ground shakes, don't ask questions too loudly. Just listen. And wait. The invitation came casually, in passing, the way Emily often delivered decisions already made. Mom wants to have dinner here on Sunday. Just us. Something cozy. I nodded, kept stirring the soup I was making. Sure. Should I get wine? No need, she said quickly. She's bringing a bottle. One of her favorites. That Sunday, the house smelled like rosemary and garlic. Emily always cooked well when her mother came over, not better, just different. More precise. Like every flavor had to pass some kind of invisible test. I offered to help, and she gave me tasks, slicing bread, lighting candles, small, harmless chores that kept me near but not involved. Isabella arrived in a long beige coat, the kind that moved like it belonged on someone important. She handed me the wine without looking me in the eye, kissed her daughter's cheek, and moved into our home like she owned part of it. The conversation was normal at first. Too normal. Emily asked about her mother's book club. Isabella asked about our neighbors. I mentioned a new colleague at work, and they nodded, uninterested. The salad was passed, the main dish served, but there was a tension in the air that no candlelight could soften. You know, Isabella said at one point, turning her fork idly through a piece of asparagus, there's something about this time of life. It's a turning point. Emily glanced at her, almost imperceptibly, then back down to her plate. What do you mean? I asked, knowing full well it wasn't addressed to me. Isabella smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I mean, when you start thinking about what you'll leave behind. What really matters. I thought that's what wills were for. I joked. Neither of them laughed. Emily said quietly, it's not about money. The next few minutes passed in near silence, except for the sound of cutlery and the occasional polite sip from a glass. I cleared the plates when we were done. As I stood at the sink, rinsing them slowly, I could hear their voices from the dining room again, low, measured, like a code only the two of them shared. Isabella, you don't owe anyone your life. Especially not someone who's already given up. Emily, it's not that simple. Isabella, it never is. That's the point. I turned on the garbage disposal, drowning out the rest. My chest felt tight, not with anger, but with recognition. This wasn't just about disappointment. This was about decisions made behind curtains, about roles assigned without asking the actors. Later, after Isabella left, Emily joined me in the kitchen. She stood beside me, drying plates, not speaking. You okay? I asked. She nodded. Tired. Your mom seemed thoughtful tonight. Emily gave a small, bitter laugh. She always is. She just hides it in compliments and side dishes. I wanted to press further, to ask what exactly this turning point was, what they meant by leaving things behind. But something held me back. Maybe I already knew. That night, as we got into bed, I watched her brush her hair, tie it up, turn off the lamp. She lay down beside me and faced away. I reached out, placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. She didn't pull away, but she didn't respond either. Minutes passed. Then, softly, she whispered, Do you ever think about second chances? I held my breath. Second chances at what? At being something else. Someone else. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. She turned back toward the wall, and in the dim glow from the hallway, I could see her eyes were still open. There's a certain kind of silence that isn't peaceful. The kind that builds up, grain by grain, like dust in corners. You don't notice it until it's everywhere, on your hands, in your throat, behind your eyes. Our home had started collecting that kind of silence. It was Thursday evening. I had come home early from work, something I rarely did, and Emily wasn't back yet. I walked into the living room, glanced at the blanket still folded neatly on the arm of the couch. The kind of neatness that means no one had sat there. Not today. Her bag was resting against the coffee table, open just slightly, as if it had tipped over. I don't know what made me pause. Maybe it was the unfamiliar folder peeking out, bright blue against the soft brown leather. I crouched, adjusted the bag, and when the folder slipped free, I caught it before it hit the floor. It was a billing statement. One of those automated printouts clinics hand you at the end of an appointment. The logo at the top was delicate, pale green, modern, Willow Grove Reproductive and Wellness Center. The name echoed somewhere in the back of my memory. I couldn't place it. My eyes scanned the page. It was a single visit. Consultation. Hormonal panel. Ultrasound prep. Total billed, $740. Date. 2 weeks ago. The same afternoon Emily had told me she was meeting an old college friend for coffee. Laura, she'd said. Remember her? She used to live in Michigan. She had even sent me a picture of a half-empty cappuccino, a croissant, and a blurry selfie with someone who barely looked like anyone I recognized. I sat on the arm of the couch, the paper light in my hands, but my chest felt heavy. I could already hear her explanation. Something logical. A joke. A misunderstanding. She would laugh it off and say it wasn't what I thought. But I wasn't thinking yet. I was listening. That night, I waited. Not with crossed arms or accusation, but with questions folded tightly in my mind, waiting for the right moment to unfold. When she came home, I was in the kitchen again, chopping herbs for dinner. She smiled when she walked in, kissed my cheek, said traffic had been a nightmare. I nodded. How's Laura? She's good, Emily replied, slipping off her shoes. Still dramatic as ever. She says hi. I turned to face her, knife still in hand, not threatening, just part of the scene. Hey, this fell out of your bag earlier. I held up the receipt. Casual. Like it might have been a flyer or a shopping list. Her eyes flicked to it. Just a second. But I saw it, that pause too small to be fear, too precise to be surprise. "Oh," she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "That's nothing. It's actually for Laura. She asked me to go with her moral support. But she didn't want her husband to know she's been thinking about IVF. I guess the billing info ended up with me." She smiled, that soft, practiced curve of her mouth. The kind she used when we ran into old neighbors and pretended we were still newlyweds. "IVF," I echoed. "Ma'am, she's worried he'll freak out. She's not even sure she wants to go through with it. It was just a consultation." I nodded slowly, folded the paper, and handed it back. "Makes sense." She slipped it into her purse, then stepped behind me, wrapped her arms loosely around my waist. "You always smell like rosemary and lemon when you cook." Her cheek rested against my back. It felt like a scene from a life I used to live. But something in her voice, in the explanation, in the way her fingers twitched lightly against my stomach, it all rang just one note off. A discord in the melody. And that night, for the first time, I searched the name of the clinic. Not for Laura. For myself. The clinic's website was professional. Clean design. Testimonials that sounded too warm to be fabricated. Willow Grove specializes in full-spectrum fertility support, it read. For individuals, for families. For hope. I had stared at those 3 words. For hope. The irony wasn't lost on me. The following Saturday, Emily asked if we could swing by a local cafe on our way to the farmer's market. She had a quick pickup from a colleague. We walked into a small corner coffee shop with exposed brick, woven light fixtures, and that faint scent of cardamom and almond milk foam that tries to make a place feel more European than suburban. I offered to order while she went to find her friend. She disappeared through the small side room, tucked past the baristas, and I stood in line with a hand on my wallet and an eye on the door. By the time I reached the front, she had returned. "Alone. Decaf latte for you," I said, placing it in front of her as we settled at a window seat. "Thanks, love," she smiled. "He's running behind." "He." She sipped carefully. "Dr. Marin. You know, I mentioned him once. Laura's doctor. He's helping with some paperwork." She looked over her shoulder casually. "Actually, there he is." I turned to see a man entering, tall, lean, dressed in a dark blazer over a t-shirt, with the kind of presence that came from knowing he didn't need to try. His smile was slow and deliberate, not charming, calculated. Emily raised a hand slightly, not quite a wave. He walked over. "Dr. Marin, this is my husband, Evan." He extended a hand. Firm grip. His eyes didn't leave mine. "Pleasure. You've got a great one here. She's been a big help lately." I nodded. "She usually is." The 3 of us stood there a moment longer than necessary. Then he glanced at his watch. "Let's not keep you from your errands. I'll email the forms tonight." "Perfect," she said. He smiled again, just at her, not at me. And then he left. Emily sat down with her latte and picked up the conversation as if nothing had happened. She talked about radishes and sourdough vendors and a new recipe she wanted to try. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way his eyes had rested on her. Not with hunger. Not with admiration. With possession. It wasn't just familiarity. It was history. That evening, while Emily was upstairs on a Zoom call with her mother, I walked out to the garage. I opened the trunk of her car, lifted the floor panel where the emergency kit was stored, and checked behind it. Nothing. No notes, no packages. Just a soft scent, faint, but not unrecognizable. Cologne. Subtle, expensive. Not mine. Back inside, I searched Dr. Marin Willowgrove and found his public profile. MD, PhD, specialist in reproductive endocrinology. Media appearances. Guest on 2 health podcasts. A blog with a smiling headshot beside an article titled The Ethics of Donor Conception in Modern Families. I clicked. Halfway through the piece, one line stood out. "Conception is more than biology. It's narrative. Some families are built in silence because the story is inconvenient to tell." I stared at that sentence until my screen dimmed from inactivity. Upstairs, I could hear Emily laugh softly at something her mother had said. A warm, familiar laugh I hadn't heard in weeks. It echoed down the hallway and landed in my chest like a cold stone in water. I didn't know their full story yet, but I had just met the man who was helping her write it. It was an overcast Tuesday. The kind where the light feels filtered through something unspoken. I had come home a little later than usual, arms full of groceries and thoughts I hadn't sorted yet. Emily was out, a late committee meeting for the fundraiser at the gallery. She'd joined the board 2 months ago. I wasn't sure if the art had improved her sense of purpose or simply offered better camouflage. I unpacked the bags absent-mindedly, eggs, rosemary crackers, the type of olives she liked but rarely ate. I moved toward the fridge, opening it out of reflex. And then I froze. It wasn't inside. It was on the front, tucked beneath a magnet shaped like a vineyard bottle, one we bought in Sonoma before everything got quiet between us. A sonogram. Grayscale. Standard printout. Slightly curled edges. The kind of image that held a world of meaning for people who knew what they were looking at. I didn't, but I knew what it was. And I knew it shouldn't be on my refrigerator. My hands stayed at my sides. I didn't reach for it. I just stared. It wasn't labeled with her name. No date. No clinic stamp. Just the image. Two small shapes. A circle. A shadow. I waited for her to return. I didn't pace. I didn't breathe heavily. I just sat on the edge of the couch, staring across the room, feeling the weight of something unconfirmed pressing into my ribs. When the door opened, I didn't turn. "Hey," she called lightly, hanging up her coat. "You beat me home." I nodded. "Groceries." She walked in, her heels clicking softly against the floorboards. Then she saw it. "Oh," she said. Just that. Then, without hesitation, she reached out, peeled the photo from under the magnet, and let out a small laugh. "That's Laura's. She left it in my car. She wanted to prank her husband by hiding it in the fridge at home. Long story. Dumb joke." I turned to look at her. Her face was smooth, unbothered. The laugh stayed on her lips, perfectly placed. "She just forgot it," she added. "I was going to give it back." She folded the photo neatly, slid it into her purse. "Sorry if that freaked you out. I should have put it away." "Does Laura often leave medical scans lying around?" Emily shrugged. "You know her. All over the place. Scatterbrained." She moved into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, leaned against the counter like it was any other Tuesday. I watched her, the way she avoided my eyes, the way her fingers gripped the glass tighter than necessary. That night, we sat in bed with our backs against separate pillows. She scrolled her phone. I read a book without turning pages. She looked up once and said, "You'd tell me if you wanted something different, right?" I glanced over. "Different how?" "Like, change. A new phase. Something to look forward to." I closed the book, placed it on the nightstand. "I think we've already started a new phase," I said. She didn't answer. The next morning, the sonogram was gone. The fridge was clean, as if nothing had ever been there. But I remembered, and I had taken a photo of it the night before. Not because I needed proof, because I needed to start building a timeline. It was one of those rare days when time gives you a detour, not a destination, just a pause. I had taken the afternoon off under the pretense of catching up on errands, but in truth, I needed space. Space away from the house, the fridge, the quiet. The grocery store wasn't crowded, just the soft hum of soft rock and the rhythmic clatter of carts. I stood in the produce section, inspecting a cluster of imperfect nectarines, when I heard a voice behind me. "Evan?" I turned. At first, I didn't place her, a familiar smile worn differently now. Then it clicked. "Megan," I said. She laughed. "Well, it's been, what, 7 years? Maybe more." 8, I replied. "Since the Whitman conference." She nodded. "Right. You gave that talk on behavioral metrics. You still doing that? In a different flavor. Marketing analytics now." We chatted for a moment, polite, light, nostalgic. Then she tilted her head. "You're still with Emily, right?" "I am." "Oh, that's great," she said, reaching for a bag of spinach. "I actually saw her a few months ago. At Willow Grove, of all places. Small world." My hands didn't move. "She didn't mention that," I said evenly. Megan shrugged. Maybe she didn't think it mattered. It's not like it's a secret. Everyone in that waiting room talks to everyone. It's weirdly supportive. I raised an eyebrow. "You two talked?" "A bit." She was lovely. Quiet. Focused. I remember her saying something about her mother, how she just wanted to give her one grandchild before it was too late. The words hit with a strange weight. Familiar, yet foreign. Like hearing your name whispered from behind a closed door. She mentioned something else, Megan added, smiling. Something about a donor she picked. "I know it's private, sorry," but she was describing his eyes. Said they were this kind of unreal green. Sounded more like a character from a novel than a real guy. My breath stayed even. She said it was anonymous? Megan hesitated. "Well, not exactly. She said it wasn't through the usual channels. That she knew him personally. Trusted him." The cart's handle felt suddenly colder under my hand. Megan must have sensed something, because she softened her tone. "Listen, I didn't mean to overstep. I just assumed you were involved in it. I smiled. Just enough. No harm, I said. It's always nice to run into someone who remembers the better parts of who we were. We said our goodbyes. She waved as she turned down the aisle. I stood there a little longer, staring at the shelf of Honeycrisp apples, watching people pass. When I got home, Emily was already there. She had candles lit in the kitchen, not the romantic kind, but the warm, staged ones she used when company came over. Something special? I asked. She shook her head. Just wanted to change the energy in the house. I set the bags down. She moved past me, her hand grazing mine with casual ease. Later that night, she brought tea to the couch, sat beside me, close but not close enough to touch. She asked about my day, and I told her the usual traffic, slow clients, boring calls. She didn't ask who I saw, and I didn't tell her, because now I knew more than she thought I did. And more importantly, I knew she believed I would never be the one to dig deeper. She was wrong. I've always believed that the difference between patience and passivity is preparation. After that conversation with Megan, I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Not because of rage. Not from heartbreak. I'd passed those exits on the highway long ago. What I felt was something far colder and more useful: clarity. The truth was no longer in question. Emily's story was no longer a puzzle. It was a script, rehearsed and controlled, its climax already written by someone else. Her mother, her doctor, herself. And I had been reduced to an empty placeholder. A name on the lease. A quiet absence in her story. So I decided to revise the ending. I started with Mark Yates, an old friend from a different life. We'd met years ago, 2 fresh faces in army dress blues, both trying to figure out who we were supposed to be. He'd become a military lawyer. I'd gone corporate. But we kept in touch, the way men do, sporadically and without obligation, but always solid when it counted. I called him from the car, keeping my voice casual. Mark, I need some advice. Quietly. He met me 2 days later at a downtown notary office, under the pretext of helping with an estate restructure. I figured you'd call me about something like this one day, he said as we sat across from each other, documents between us. Not the what. Just the way you sound. I need power of attorney, I said simply, for financial and legal discretion. But also, I paused, choosing my words. I need a way to move without her knowing. Temporarily. Mark didn't blink. Children? No, not yet, I said. But there's going to be one. And it won't be mine. He exhaled through his nose, a sound of acknowledgement more than sympathy. I can write a clause into your financial trust, redirection, access under conditions. When do you want it triggered? When she goes public. When she stops pretending I'm part of this. He nodded and started drawing lines across a form. You'll want a digital trail but no notifications. Can you give me access to your shared bank records? I already exported them, I said, sliding over a thumb drive. He looked at me for a moment. You're building something. I'm just making sure when it ends on my terms. That evening, I returned home just before Emily. I had cooked something simple, roasted vegetables, her favorite bread. The house smelled honest. Familiar. She walked in, smiled absently, kissed me on the cheek. This is nice. You didn't have to. I shrugged. It felt like the kind of night that deserved something warm. We ate in near silence. She talked about a friend's baby shower she might help plan. I asked her how work was. Neither of us said what we were thinking. After dinner, she opened her laptop at the dining table while I rinsed the dishes. Do you remember what I said a few weeks ago? She asked suddenly, not looking up. About second chances? I dried my hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. I do. She closed the screen, finally meeting my eyes. I think I'm ready. Ready for what? For what comes next, she said. Whatever that means. I nodded. Then I'll support you. However I can. She smiled soft, touched with something like gratitude. But deep inside, I knew. She thought she was in control. She thought this was her transformation. Her choice. She didn't realize I had already built the stage for the final act. Every document signed. Every thread tied. All I had to do now was wait for the curtain to rise. The house was spotless. Emily had been cleaning all morning, the kind of cleaning that comes from a place of nervous energy. The chairs were rearranged. The good plates came out. She even lit the candles shaped like white peonies that she'd been saving for a special occasion. Her mother arrived first. Isabella. In pearls. She kissed Emily twice on the cheek and handed her a heavy box wrapped in gold foil. I thought this might help mark the moment, she said, her eyes flicking toward me and then quickly away. The rest of the guests trickled in, mostly extended family, 2 neighbors, and a few friends from Emily's gallery circle. They all came bearing small gifts, bottles of wine, and that warm, vague anticipation people carry when they know something is being celebrated, but aren't quite sure what it is yet. Emily didn't clarify. The centerpiece of the evening was supposed to be a dinner, but it became clear from her outfit, from Isabella's constant glances, from the way everyone was positioned around the living room like an audience, that something was planned. I played my part perfectly. I brought out drinks. I lit candles. I handed out plates with small bites and smiled at stories that no longer reached me. And then, when everyone was seated, Emily stood and gently tapped her glass with the side of a fork. "I want to thank you all for being here," she said, her voice a little brighter than usual. "Tonight means a lot to me. To us." She looked at me, a glance so brief it could have been accidental. Isabella rose beside her, took her hand. "We're here," she said, "to celebrate the beginning of something long hoped for." A murmur of polite surprise circled the room. Emily stepped forward again. "But before we share more, we thought it would be lovely to look back. A short slideshow, just a few memories." She nodded to me. "Evan, could you?" "Of course," I said, already holding the remote. The lights dimmed. The television screen blinked to life. For the first few seconds, what appeared were exactly what everyone expected: vacation shots from Big Sur, an anniversary dinner at a vineyard, Emily holding a glass of wine and laughing beneath fairy lights. Then came the ultrasound photo. And then, a paused frame from a security camera, Emily in her car, parked in the Willow Grove lot. She's not alone. Marin is leaning in the window, his hand resting on the door frame too familiarly. The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Someone coughed. Then came the receipts, billing statements, clinic logs, scans of appointment confirmations, Emily's signature on intake forms under a field labeled donor consent. Isabella sat frozen. Emily didn't speak. I let it play. Next came the audio. Low, but audible. Her voice. Her mother's. The clip from that quiet Sunday dinner, enhanced and replayed. "You don't owe him your future. This is about legacy." Then Emily, "He'll never know. He stopped wanting a future the day he gave up children." The screen went dark. No one moved. I stepped forward. "This wasn't for spite," I said quietly, my voice the only sound in the room. And it wasn't because I was angry. I looked at Emily. It was because I needed everyone here to know the story they were being invited into. Emily opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her hand moved instinctively toward her stomach, though there was no visible change yet. Just the shadow of something coming. "I won't raise someone else's secret," I continued. "And I won't pretend this family still has a sinner." I turned to Isabella. "You wanted a legacy. Now it's yours to explain." I left the room before anyone could stop me. Behind me, no one clapped. No one cried. Only silence. And in that silence, I heard something better than forgiveness. I heard ending. The following morning, the house was still. I woke early. Earlier than usual. The light hadn't fully filtered through the curtains, but I could already see the outline of the living room beyond the hallway, still dim, still bearing the echo of last night's silence. Emily hadn't come to bed. I found her sitting at the dining table in her robe, a cup of untouched tea before her, her fingers wrapped around the mug like she needed its warmth but couldn't quite feel it. She didn't look up when I walked in. I set a folder on the table. No ceremony. No explanation. She stared at it. "I've already spoken with Mark," I said. "The papers are filed. Quietly. Discreetly. There won't be a scene. Unless you make one." Her voice was dry when she finally spoke. "You were watching me." "No," I said. "I was listening. And you stopped speaking to me months ago." She ran her hand through her hair. "You don't understand." "I do," I said calmly. "More than you think." She looked at me then. For the first time in weeks, really looked. Her eyes weren't full of rage. Or shame. They were empty in a way that made me feel more distant from her than if we'd been continents apart. "It wasn't supposed to go this way," she whispered. "I know. I just wanted—" "A child," I interrupted. "You wanted a child. Your mother wanted a legacy. You both got what you wanted." She shook her head. "It's not like that." I tilted mine. "Isn't it?" Her lip trembled, but she forced it still. I almost admired her for that. She opened the folder. Legal language. Signatures. Transfer of accounts. Relinquishment of claim. Clean, cold sentences. The bones of a life categorized. "And what now?" she asked. I stepped back from the table. "Now, nothing," I said. "There is no us to salvage. You made a decision that excluded me entirely. You build a future where I was a placeholder, a narrative convenience. She blinked. I didn't think you'd care. That stayed in the air longer than anything else. You didn't think, I said. That's the most honest thing you've said. She pressed her hand flat against her stomach again. Still no visible change, but I could see the weight of it on her. A door opened upstairs. Isabella appeared at the railing, her face pale, her robe cinched too tightly. She didn't speak. She knew. I looked at her, really looked. You taught her well, I said. She flinched. Just a little. Like someone realizing the weapon they handed over had a recoil. I'm leaving this house today, I continued, still facing them both. You'll have what you wanted. Your child. Your name. Your version of motherhood. But you'll raise it without me. Emily moved as if to speak, but stopped herself. This isn't revenge, I added. It's just removal. She closed her eyes. Maybe to shut the words out. Maybe to pretend none of this was happening. But it was. It had. And now it ended. I turned, picked up the overnight bag I'd packed the night before, and walked to the front door. The hallway echoed under my steps. At the threshold, I paused, hand on the frame, and spoke without turning around. You didn't just betray me. You erased me. You replaced a husband with a narrative. I opened the door. And now you'll raise a child, without a witness. The latch clicked softly behind me. No one followed. No one called my name. And that was the truest ending I could have hoped for.